You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Hey, we're coming here with a great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for being here. And once again, make sure you refer the show to your friends, neighbors, relatives. Tell them to sign up and listen in and all that good stuff. Get them to subscribe at iTunes, of course. You can go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Also, goodreads.com/Chris Voss. See everything we're reading and reviewing over there. Our big LinkedIn newsletter. Of course, subscribe to that and the 122-member LinkedIn group on LinkedIn. Of all places, the LinkedIn group on LinkedIn. Who knew? It's not on TikTok. The LinkedIn group isn't on TikTok. I don't know. This makes no sense. Anyway, guys, we have an amazing gentleman on the show. He's going to be talking to us about what he does and how he does it. Shawn Rowland, Dr. Shawn Rowland, I should say, is a board member, family medicine physician who's on the show with us today. He's also the founder of JASE Medical. He has a passion for educating and empowering his patients that led to the development of JASE, a company that he founded in 2021 to help people be better prepared medically, which is certainly something everyone needs to do, because when emergencies happen or you don't have something you need, that's a problem, especially in today's world where we're running out of everything, I guess, including common sense. So welcome to the show, Shawn. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. We certainly appreciate it. And can you give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please?
Absolutely. So it's JASE Medical, JASE medical.com.
What do you do, Shawn, at JASE Medical?
JASE Medical, we are an online telemedicine service that brings patients, physicians, and pharmacies together with the purpose of providing patients a cachet, a supply of life-saving medications such as antibiotics.
And what was the reason you decided to create this company? What was the motivator, or what was the thing that was going on in the market that made you decide this is really important right now at this time?
Yeah, so this is something I truly am really passionate about this topic. So any chance I get to talk about it, I'm so happy to further, educate people about some things that I think most of the general public just isn't aware of. So as far as the genesis for JASE Medical, this was 2018, 2019. I was working at a mid-sized community hospital down on the southern border, working in the inpatient service at this hospital. And every week or every day, actually, we'd have a meeting, a little brief, wherever the team would get together, and the pharmacist would come in, the hospital pharmacist would come in and explain, what, if we were short on any supplies or medications. Now, remember, this is pre-pandemic. I'm working in the United States, one of the top healthcare systems in the world. And routinely, he would come in and tell us about shortages. These were antibiotics and other medications that we use daily were vital.
Wow.
And a lot of times it was, we have it, but we have a limited supply, or sometimes we just didn't have it. So that was the first kind of what's going on. This was in the day when we had everything we needed, right? The shortages we're dealing with now were just not even something that was on anyone's radar.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was, that caused me to start doing some digging, and I started to do some research. And what I found was really surprising. And when I started answering this question, I said, most people aren't aware of this. This is the secret. The secret is that 90+% of every medication that's prescribed in the United States on a daily basis is not produced in the United States. They're all produced overseas, usually China and India. Those are the top two producers, and then some other countries scattered in there. When it comes to antibiotics, in particular, our generic antibiotics, which is what everyone uses every day, all of them come from outside the United States. Yeah. So that was just kind of the initial, wow, that's concerning. Now, fast forward, middle of the pandemic, my family and I, we moved back to Utah where I practice medicine currently. And we're getting things set up. It's the middle of the pandemic. I'm trying to start a new practice. And for the first time, I had access to the cost of medications which, physicians are so far from removed in the insurance world. We're so far removed from the cost of a lot of the treatments that we prescribe. And so for the first time, I could see what the true cost of these medications were for me and for my patients. And that was another surprise. I found, wow, these generic medications are really affordable. They're actually really cheap. So putting the two together, I thought, well, I need to have supplies for my practice, for my own practice. And then I thought, well, what about my neighbors? What about my family members? What about the community members around me that should also have access to these medications that, number one, they're ripe for disruption in our supply chain. Number two, they're relatively inexpensive. And so how can I do this? So that led me on another journey. And for about a year, when we founded JASE Medical, and then needed to figure out, okay, what is the right way to do this? How can we do it safely, responsibly, comply with all the regulations out there? The medical industry is not for the faint of heart when it comes to starting a company. And we were able to find a path forward. And what we came up with was what we're offering today, which is basically a pack of 5 different antibiotics that can treat a range of bacterial illnesses. And you get those so that you have them on hand before you need them. And there's a lot of maybe use cases and things we can talk about later on, but that is the genesis of why JASE and how JASE came to be.
There you go. Yeah, we had Catherine Eban, who wrote the book Bottle of Lies: The Inside Story of the Generic Drug Boom, and she talked about where some of these generic things are made. A lot of stuff in India, some different variations of the quality of it, and it was quite eye opening. So basically, you make an emergency antibiotic kit that you guys provide or sell on your website. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so we do it through a telemedicine process. There were some good things that came out of COVID. One of those is telemedicine was kind of went on a fast forward course of adoption where people, restrictions were eased state to state, and people were more used to getting their healthcare in. And I think for me as a family medicine physician, primary care physician, the power behind telemedicine, I think, can't be overstated. It doesn't mean it's the panacea for all things medical, but for the right use cases, it allows people access to care that otherwise have a difficult time getting that access. And so through that telemedicine process, it's a specific process. The only reason you come to JASE Medical today is to get this pack of antibiotics. And so the questions that the doctors are going to ask, that whole encounter is very purposeful and driven to that final outcome. So it's an easy encounter. You go on the website, takes maybe 5 minutes, 10 at the most, to answer the questionnaire. That goes to a physician who reviews it. If they have any additional questions, they'll reach out to you. And at the end of that encounter, they end up sending these prescriptions to one of our partner pharmacies where we've prearranged special pricing. They package all the medications and ship them to your door. And so the whole process, really from beginning to end, is about a 10-minute process. It takes a few days for the meds to get to you, but can be done from the convenience of your own home.
And what are some of the medications that are in this emergency antibiotic kit? And I think there's some reasons you guys cite on your website as to what some of these things are important for, like travel and just accidents around the house.
Exactly. So great question. The trick in as we're kind of developing, okay, which medications should we supply? Ideally you'd want to give everyone something for every eventuality, but there's cost and safety involved in this decision. So what we came up with was 5 antibiotics, and these 5 antibiotics cover a range of number one, the most common things that are just commonly out there, whether that's UTIs, pneumonia, skin infections, sinus infections, that sort of thing. But then also we wanted to, as thinking preparedness wise, we wanted to cover some of the most serious and deadly things that are out there. So think about bioterror, things like anthrax attacks, the Remian plague. Those are the top 3 that the government's identified. So we wanted to cover for those as well. So those 5 antibiotics include basically the common and the most deadly, and in an amount that you could treat more than just one course of illness. The way we put it together was basically we intended it to be for one adult to cover anything that might happen within in a year's period of time. And that's gets into some of the other part of this and doing it responsibly, not just throwing as many pills as we can your way, trying to do it in a way that's responsible for the community. So there is a limit, but those, as far as what they cover, there's a whole range. It comes with a little book. The book is written to be accessible to the layperson, where you can, there's look at some of the symptoms you might be having, and it'll help guide you into what would be the best medication to take in that instance. Now, we always encourage people to reach out. They can reach out to their private doctor, their private, their family doc. I've got this going on, and the doctor could tell them, here's the medication you can take. And they say, oh, nice. I've already got it in my medicine kit here. Or they can reach out to us as well. And as part of the service, we offer them that access to our physicians as well.
Do I have this correct? A lot of them are penicillin based. So it's penicillin, if people are familiar with that, for fixing stuff, right?
One of them is, yes. Okay. The amoxicillin clavulanate, which is also known by the brand name Augmentin. That is a penicillin-based medication. And actually, that reminds me, because we get a lot of questions from people who say, well, what if I have allergies? And penicillin happens to be one of the more common antibiotic allergies. And that's part of the telemedicine process that, those questions are addressed. And then we have substitutions. If that's the case, we'll substitute that with a different medication. But certainly, yes, Augmentin is in the kit. That's a great choice for things like sinusitis, for example. That would be a first line choice there.
Yeah. I can attest to why it's important to have this stuff on hand. Number one, telemedicine is probably around because of, I did an article with Forbes in 2012, 2013. Calling for telemedicine and just complaining about, having to wait in waiting rooms for multiple hours and then almost losing my toe and having to go in for a bone scrape. And I'd gone in Southern California to a doctor that, it was questionable what they really were up to because they really had a hard on to have me referred to the hospital. They're clearly getting a referral fee. And they wouldn't prescribe penicillin to me because they're like, well, everyone, it's an issue. And I've always been one of those people that when I get sick, and usually it's some sort of sinus infection or I used to get them really bad in Utah with allergies and stuff. But it's always been something where if I get a little bit of, just the first few pills, a hit of an amoxicillin or penicillin will clear up whatever I've got going on. It's like a miracle drug for me. And these guys would not give it to me. I'd burnt my toes and they gotten infected. And there's been 2 other times where I've gotten walking pneumonia, usually from a flight. And I'm a single guy. I'm a guy who just toughs it out. And I just go, it's a flush one. We'll be fine. And then it ends up being a viral infection or whatever. And then I've had to do telemedicine. But I called for telemedicine in 2012, 2013. The article's still up if anyone wants to read it. And I actually thought about doing a telemedicine company at the time, or knew the regulations were going to be nightmarish. But being able to have the medications where you're not having to call the doctor, he schedules you in a week from now, and, being able to jump on an infection is super important. And I learned that the hard way with the 2 walking pneumonia things where, it starts, it starts out as a normal infection and then it goes viral. And then once it goes viral, then you need the top guns. It starts costing a lot of money, I guess.
No, that's, number one, unfortunate. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Chris. But you bring up a couple of great points. Number one, 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. Number one is this idea of antibiotic stewardship. So that seems to be the pendulum currently is swung in the medical community fully the other way, where the idea of stewardship means we withhold medications. But there's another part to stewardship. And that is that being a good steward means that when it's appropriate, you do absolutely provide these medications. The fear, of course, of antibiotic resistance is a real thing. But I think nowadays, with as long as we've all kind of been dealing with the education, we've learned that not all illnesses are caused by bacteria. Most are caused by viruses, and that antibiotics don't help for a virus. They don't help when you've got just the typical viral cold, right? And I think the general public gets that. And part of our effort is increasing that education to let people know that, yes, number one, not all illnesses are appropriate to be treated with antibiotics. But number 2, as you mentioned, when it is a bacterial infection, time is of the essence. The sooner you get on these medications, the more effective and they're going to be and the better outcome you're going to have. So if we can get to a point where every household in America is used to using these things appropriately, has them on hand like they have their Tylenol or their ibuprofen, and at that first sign of a real problem, they've got the medications that they need so that they don't end up getting, bone infections or septicemia where their whole system's infected at that point and they end up in the hospital on IV antibiotics. Those situations can be avoided.
Yeah. Highly. I highly recommend having something like this on hand. But in my case, the first time I went in, they're like, well, we'll just give you the cheap stuff and not the penicillin, but we'll just give you the cheap stuff and you go back in a week. And by then I was already really infected. And, then a week goes by, then I schedule an appointment with them. And then by then it's really getting out of control. And then they're telling me I need to go for a bone scrape. And so I end up sending them a really nice letter because I've done legal work. And I said, hey, you either give me what it was is I went in a second time. They finally gave me what I needed. They were trying to force me to still go get the bone scrape. They gave me what I needed and it worked really well, but then they only gave me like 4 days or 5 days. And I started losing track and they wouldn't give me a second dose. And I was like, it was insane. It was just completely insane. And they're like, you need to go get a bone scrape. And so I sent them a legal letter and they sent me another refill because of the legal letter. And then it cleared up and it was done. There was no bone scrape needed. It was fine. It's the greatest foot ever. But yeah, the other thing we should talk about, I mean, we're running out of tampons now. That's the new thing that we're running out of. We just recently ran out of baby formula. It sounds like there's, a lot of shortages. This is the last thing I'd want to run out of is penicillin.
Right. Absolutely. The premise of JASE was really built on that kind of supply chain vulnerability, and that can't be overstated. I think you mentioned baby formula, the tampons, baby formula, 100% of our country's supply of baby formula comes domestically. It's all produced here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And, we shut down one factory in Michigan and the consequences are disastrous and lead to these, to legitimately, lives being in danger for children's babies. When I think, okay, that's a domestic supply chain issue, how much more at risk? It's not a leap of the imagination to see that now drawing that out to 100% dependence on a small when I say small, I mean a relatively small group of producers internationally of these medications. I mean, it just opens up the door for other possibilities, whether it's a geopolitical wars, disasters in that part of the world. There's just so much that is potential to disrupt out there. Now that's the supply chain issue. There's also a part here that I think also should be mentioned, and that is, and you mentioned it in your experience, and it reminded me actually of an experience I had just the other day with a patient, and that is just basically timely access to the right kind of care, even if there's not a supply chain issue. Well, you still need that medication on time and the right medication. I had a patient, this just happened 2 weekends ago, who had a procedure done on her tooth, was getting some implants done. And the dentist had done his initial work. A week went by and she was feeling like, she's still feeling quite a bit of pain and things seemed to be getting worse. So she reached out to him and I guess he was leaving for vacation, was trying to get out of the office, declined to see her again and basically sent in a prescription. In this case for, you mentioned penicillin, this was for amoxicillin, which by the way was not the right drug to prescribe. Said, here, take these pills and I'll see you at our first follow-up, which was weeks and weeks away. Mm-hmm. So now a few more days go by. Now we're getting into the next weekend. She calls me and says, I'm really sick. I need you to come take a look at me. What's going on? I didn't know her story about the tooth at this time. She was having some respiratory issues. So I went and checked on her. She was indeed really sick, found out what the story was with this tooth, changed her antibiotic. And she's one that had a JASE case. And I was able to tell her, you've got that Augmentin. You should be taking the Augmentin. Start that right now. And you need to get in to see, whether it's an oral surgeon or a dentist, you need to get in to see one of them as soon as you can. So she was able to get an appointment set up over the weekend. Let's see, it was on Monday. On Monday morning, she went in, had already been on the antibiotic for a couple of days at that point. And sure enough, she had a horrible infection, which left untreated, those tooth infections quickly make their way into some really sensitive areas because those nerves are all right there in your face and get attached to your brain and things go bad really quick. The oral surgeon who treated her commended her on being on that antibiotic that she was already on from the JASE case and told her to continue taking it. But that's just an everyday scenario of just, a timing, whether it being the weekend with a provider who was not accessible and something that any one of us could find ourselves in at any given time. So just again, a prudent thing to have access to these kinds of medications, not just for the end of the world supply chain or bioterror things, but for those everyday events as well.
Yeah. And not to knock on doctors, but they're busy. When you want to schedule with a doctor, I mean, sometimes you got to put it off a week or sometimes more. Depends on, I think, what you're going in for. But, that was my problem. I think when I scheduled with a doctor for the toe, and in the past, I've used telemedicine twice now, and I can attest that I love the crap out of it. In fact, the 2 times I used it, I was pretty much walking pneumonia, and all I needed was that Z-Pack. And as soon as I started taking that Z-Pack, I'd been pretty bad, so it took about 24 hours to kick in, but I could tell I was on track again. Same thing with my foot. I think they upgraded me. I think it was C-Pro, the C-Pro that they put me on
Cipro
for the foot.
Probably,
yeah. And I'd gotten really bad, so amoxicillin wasn't quite cutting it. But I just pulled the article up here. It was done in 2012 with my friend John Nosta of Forbes magazine. And he interviewed me for an article after my foot had gone through this thing and almost got to a bone scrape. Yeah, the one time I got, not to make this about me, but I'm just trying to show some examples. I'm a good example. The one time I got walking pneumonia, I got in the flu or whatever, on a plane coming back from CES, I think it was, or a CDS show. And, I just hack through it, I'm a man. And it goes from that one stage to the viral stage. And then you've got to have really powerful Z-Pack, and you got to really throw some hard stuff at it, but you don't want it to get to that point. Because like you say, the infection, there are people that die and the infection goes in their brain. It can go into your heart. It can, you can end up you can kill yourself if you're not careful.
Yeah. It's typically those, if you are going to get a pneumonia, a lot of times it starts out as you have a cold, you have a virus that like any other cold, you're coughing, it sets in and you get that post-viral pneumonia, which does need to be treated with antibiotics. Part of the other, I guess, as much as we'd love everyone to come and get their kit from us, at the end of the day, what we're really after is just raising this awareness and wanting people to be prepared. You mentioned how long it can be sometimes to get that appointment. Hey, if you've got a great relationship with your primary doc and you can call them up, maybe you're okay waiting the 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks for that appointment and get to him and say, hey doc, I'd like 5 antibiotics. I'm not sick right now, but I'd like these 5. Do you think you could prescribe those for me? And maybe you've got a great relationship and he says, sure. And he writes those scripts. You take those scripts to the pharmacy and you pay retail rates. Something I didn't mention was that this is not covered by insurance. So you're going to be paying out of pocket for all of this, right? So you're going to pay out of pocket for that doctor visit. You're going to be paying out of pocket for the meds. So you're going to take those prescriptions to the pharmacy and get them filled and pay whatever the rates are at the pharmacy. 100% would be happy if that was the best situation for you to do. I'm going to say do it, because at the end of the day, that's what I care about, is that you've got access to those medications. Now, the flip side is we did spend quite a bit of time and effort putting together this telemedicine encounter in a way that allows people to come on the site at their own time. Takes 5-10 minutes to fill it out. You pay the fee for the meds, and all the rest of it happens basically behind the scenes. Next, you wait a few days and you have those medications at your door at what really is an affordable rate. We did some cost test comparisons. And when you look at retail rates, which are all across the board, as you may know, if you've looked at any, when you go to a Walmart or a Costco or wherever, they've all got really different pricing for their meds. But anyway, the range that we've seen, if you were to do this on your own, is anywhere from $400 to $700 all in, when you include the doctor visit and everything else. So our entire process and visit, the medications, everything, $259 gets you the kit and you're set. You can put it next to your medications. You can put it with your food storage, wherever you'd like, and you're set for quite a while, which brings me maybe to another question, which is how long do these medications last? That seems to be probably the most common we get. Granted, you're spending some money here, and we hope you never have to use them, and you hope you never have to use them, but you also don't want to have to keep doing it over and over again because the medications expire. So this is another really interesting thing that we come to find out as we're doing all this, getting JASE up and running and learning more about these medications. So the federal government maintains quite a large stockpile of a lot of these antibiotics, some of them specifically for those bioterror events, so that we've got some access to some kind of treatment. So they maintain these large strategic stockpiles. They're scattered around the country, and they were having to turn them over every couple of years, because that's supposedly when the medications expired, at obviously great expense. So they commissioned a study, and this is all published. All these studies are published and accessible. You can read all about them. They're rather fascinating. But what they found out was that when these medications are stored appropriately, And that just means they're kept dry in a cool environment. The average across the board, when you average them all out, was a minimum of 5 years. Basically, they retained greater than 90% of their potency for a minimum of 5 years, with a lot of the ones that we chose in our pack actually showing that they retain that potency for as long as 15 plus years. So that expiration date is something that obviously the manufacturer has to put something on there. They're not incentivized to make it a long date. States have laws for the pharmacists that say that your prescription can only be good for a year. So they have to put that year date on there. But it turns out that the actual longevity of these medications when stored properly is far beyond that. So that should also provide some peace of mind for people who are thinking, if I want to do this, how long are they really good for? Again, it's going to depend on keeping them, in that dry environment. Humidity will kill them quickly. Heat will kill them quickly, but you can get them to last for quite a while. There's one
don't leave them out in the sun.
Yeah.
Don't leave the meds out in the sun.
Don't let them get wet. The other part to that, though, is back in the day, medications, tetracycline is one of them, which was a common antibiotic. It's still used, not as much as it used to be, but that medication and some other antibiotics, over time, they degrade into toxic substances and they would actually kill you. And so that's the fear of, if I take an expired medication, is this going to not be, is it no longer amoxicillin? Is it something else? And we specifically chose these 5, again, wanting to cover the most that we could cover as far as the range of illness, some of the most serious illnesses, but also find medications that were relatively safe when it comes to antibiotics. None of these 5 medications over time will degrade into any toxic substance. At worst, you would maybe lose some potency after many, many years. So another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to take some of these things over, mostly, stuff that will help you. You mentioned the pricing, $259.95 includes all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these medications. And then on your website, you've got a pricing comparison where to buy all these from Target, Walmart, or Walgreens may cost you 2 to 3 times as much. But usually 3 times as much, which makes sense. I mean, you're buying all this stuff at full retail from these guys who this is how they make their money.
Right.
And to me, it just makes sense because the speed of when you can get on something to keep it from becoming something far worse, like I did with my foot. If I would have had the medications right away when I first got my burn to maybe get ahead of any sort of infection. The same thing with the 2 times I got walking pneumonia. If I would have jumped on the original sickness and got that knocked out, it never would have gotten to that point where I think there's one, I think the second one I should have been in the hospital. But once I got the Z-Pack, I came out of it, and that was all the thing. Now, you market this also, I should mention, in US and Canada. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. We opened a couple of months ago in Canada. We're in every province, in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. We had one that took a little longer than the others, but we're all across Canada, all 50 states in the United States. And we're looking at a couple of other countries right now. It was a surprise, actually. I'll be honest. The focus obviously was on the US. And as we rolled the service out, we started getting a lot of inquiries from other countries. And it was just something, I didn't have familiarity. I had familiarity with some medical systems outside the U.S., worked down in Mexico, but didn't really, and in Mexico, it's a different story, right? Antibiotics it's easier they're easier to come by. But certainly in other countries, really, gosh, Australia, the UK, the EU, Japan, just to name a few of the other countries that have reached out to us with people, number one, seeing the same issue with the supply chain, because their drugs, in a lot of cases also come from China and India, and also that issue with access. So it's not just a U.S. thing, it's a worldwide thing. Another part of this is, and I would encourage your listeners is hopefully they come to the site, they go through that process. But a lot of people are also taking other medications. And when it comes to your blood pressure medication, your thyroid medication, your diabetes medication, those also are produced outside the United States and have the same potential risk for disruption. And so we get that. That's a super common question. Hey, what about, can I get a supply of? Turns out those drugs are also relatively inexpensive. When you're paying your copay is paying the cost of the drug. Your insurance company's not paying anything for that drug. You're paying for it. So you could actually have a year's supply of those medications in certain circumstances, depending on your health and the stability of your condition. But you could easily afford a year's supply of those medications. So we get that same question. And to save my customer service girls some grief from your listeners writing in, I'll answer the question here. We are poised and really close to being able to offer a lot of those chronic condition medications as well in that same Same model. Yeah. As a long-term supply where you can get, a 6 month up to a year supply of a lot of those common chronic condition medications. And so we're really excited about that, really. And we've got some other things coming down the pipeline, but all in that same vein of how to empower people to be better prepared medically, how to make sure that they have the resources, both from an education standpoint, but from the actual medication as well, to not be wholly dependent on a system that we've seen in the past can quickly be overwhelmed. It doesn't take much during a catastrophe to just overwhelm your local health system, and that access that you need, which when it's medical access, it needs to be timely, can quickly be taxed. So that's one of the things that we're trying to just bring some awareness to.
I grew up with a family from Utah that always invested in food storage. And all our lives we'd have food storage. And you talk about in your site how, emergency preparedness for medicine probably is almost more important than food storage. Whether it's a disaster that takes place, and we seem to have a lot of those lately, if you haven't noticed. There's a war going on that could spill over. That war is already creating supply chain issues. There's so many different things going on. There's inflation that we're probably going to be dealing with for the next year or two. You just can't see the future. And I'm looking over your website here, the 5 emergency medicines that you have here. One's good, some examples. One's good for travelers, diarrhea, bladder, kidney infections, pneumonia, bioterror, wound infections. This is all the stuff you really need. And like you say, if there's a natural disaster, it seems to happen everywhere nowadays. We saw the recent flooding in Yellowstone. Just it seems like the weather has gone really crazy on us. Traveling in a foreign country, I've had lots of friends travel and get sick. And when you're traveling, you can't, hey, can you see a doctor in France in 2 weeks? No, I'm not going to be here in 2 weeks. You're traveling, I'm sick, I need help now. And for me, like I say, penicillin has always been such a quick shot in the arm. I mean, I've had really bad nasal infections, sinus infections from allergies and stuff. And just for some reason, penicillin is like a miracle drug for me. It just bounced back right away from it. And let's see, is there anything more we haven't touched on about your guys' service and what you guys do?
No, I think we've really hit on certainly all the highlights that we try to get the word out about. Being aware, just where all these things are coming from, where those potential issues could be. This is not it's something that we just don't hear a lot about. You talk to someone in the medical community though, and they'll tell you. I mean, just the other week there was a national, and it's still going on, a national shortage of contrast to do CT. When you get a CT scan, a lot of times they use contrast. That substance is in short supply. 100% of hospitals in the United States have reported drug shortages in the last couple of years. It's across the board. So and you may be saying, well, that hasn't affected me. And my little reminder there is it may not have, but this is all just to tell you that it's a razor's edge that we're riding, and people, we're saying, what's next? You brought it up earlier. What's next? Is it tampons? Is it baby formula?
Toilet paper.
Right. So this is one of those things where
bread.
Right. It's everything. It's computer chips. It's whatever, good luck ordering a new appliance. You might be lucky to get it in 6 months. So we're all kind of aware of that now. And this is just one of those things that, hey, I hope it never happens. I hope we never have a supply chain issue, and that would be great if we didn't. But for a short, relatively short portion of your day, 5 to 10 minutes, and for a relatively inexpensive investment, you can at least get some peace of mind that you're covered in this one area of the dozens that are out there. This is the one little thing that we're trying to do to make a difference.
I can highly recommend it based on the stories that I illustrated. Man, I could have saved myself so much pain. And then, of course, downtime. For me, I'm an entrepreneur, so time is money. And being down for 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, I've got smart friends that are smart entrepreneurs, and they always have like a Z-Pack or something on hand. And they just jam that when they start feeling, they get a little cough or something, and then they're fine. And they don't lose all the time that you can lose. And in this world, you can't afford to be down. I mean, it's just crazy. And there's so many flus going around. We saw that with now monkeypox is a thing, and
right.
And of course, COVID and everything else. But anyway, anything more you want to touch on before we go out, and give us your .com so we can look that up and get in touch with you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the time. Always love talking about about JASE and just educating people. It's JASE medical.com. What I would encourage people to do is, we don't have our chronic meds. They're coming here really shortly. Get on the site, order your antibiotics, and you'll be on our list, and you'll be the first to hear when we do get those chronic meds going as well.
There you go. That'll be good. I know my mom's on a lot of meds, and I'd hate to see her meds disrupted. I think my sister in a care center is on a lot of meds too as well. And yeah, it's just crazy what's going on in the world with supply chains. We've had a couple authors on that have done books on supply chains, and I don't think they realized how crazy it was going to get when they wrote their books, but it definitely showed the cracks in the system.
Yeah, that just in time kind of mentality, I guess it worked for a while, but I think this is here to stay, and I think it's going to be a while if we ever return to what we were used to before. In the meantime, there are some steps that can be taken to at least maybe not on a societal level. If we had production back in the U.S., that would be great. We opened up a few of our own factories for some of these medications, and hopefully that is eventually what will happen. But in the meantime, it's something that you can do on a personal level.
Definitely. Oh yeah, we ran out of medical masks. I remember thinking when that came out, I was like, how do we run out of medical? What the heck? So yeah.
Right.
Anyway, guys, I highly recommend the service. Check it out. It's definitely important. And like I say, it saves me having stuff on hand, because you just need to jump on stuff. Because when it gets bad, where you gotta start going to the hospital and running up bills, or you've got an infection that can kill you, that's the last time you want to be chasing. You don't want to be chasing it, basically. So guys, be sure to check it out. Go to jasemedical.com and check out what he's got going over there. Great website. Thanks for being on the show. We certainly appreciate it, Shawn.
Thanks,
Thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it.
And thanks, Monty, for tuning in. Thank you. And thanks, Monis, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit the bell notification. Our groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and follow the show over there. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.